Hey everybody, on this episode of Gaming and Collecting, we are going to be having another Collecting Stories and Experiences episode, this time talking to Chris Coplien from the Retro Hangover Podcast. Lots of stories were shared with this one. Hope you all enjoy the episode. So, this is where I'd normally say how you been, but we got a guest this time. We've got Chris from Retro Hangover. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, I'm doing great, Bill. Thanks for having me, both of you. Pleasure being back here on the Gaming and Collecting podcast. I've been on here a few times, and it's always great coming back and talking with y'all.
Oh, thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
And like I normally say every episode, how you guys been?
I guess
awkward silence every time.
Go ahead, Alex. I just rambled for a little bit, so.
Okay. Well, I've been doing great. For those of you, it's been pretty on the show that I've been going through a little bit of a job struggle, but I turned in my 2 weeks notice 3 weeks ago, and I started a new job on Monday. So, woo! I'm out of golf ball hell. So. Yeah, so it's been pretty good. Mostly just training this week, which has been interesting, but it's been pretty nice.
Congratulations on the new job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still stuck in golf ball hell, but
hey, they're hiring in the tool room, Phil. I'll put a good word in for you.
I don't know. From what it sounds like, they have more overtime there than I'm already working now, so I think I'll stick around where I'm at.
As for me, I'm counting down the days until I'm going to be in a job struggle. About 318 days now, and until I am done with my job, which is with the military. So I'm just wondering what I'm even going to be doing at that time. So hopefully that's a good landing spot. But in the meantime, I'm just being a massive pain in the ass at work, because I think anyone, I don't know how it's like in the civilian world, but I think anyone who knows that they're on their way out the door generally doesn't care as much and doesn't put as So
the last 2 weeks I did nothing at that place. Nothing.
Now imagine having that mentality for 2 years straight, and that's kind of where I'm at, because I know the end is there. So as long as I don't do anything illegal or anything that can get me like early fired, so to speak, my effort is minimal. So that's what's going on in my life right now, other than just, the normal mundanery that exists. Just still collecting video games, which I guess is apropos for today. But other than that, yeah, that's what's going on. Just trying to make it through the struggle to find another struggle, and hopefully be in a position that Alex is currently in right now in about a year's time.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I laughed. Speaking of collecting, it's funny how like the mindset of people has changed over the years. Like I posted one of my most recent collecting like hauls across all the Discord servers, and I think I got more comments about my rug than I did the actual games on the collection. I had like 3 people like, "That's a nice carpet." I'm like, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Not what the post was about.
Priorities.
Well, for those who like rugs, there is a nice rug behind me, so comment away. No.
Has a nice design and flowers.
Yes.
Very much brings out the room.
Yeah. Why, thank you.
I've got a dead I've got a dead Sega Master System chilling back there.
I almost thought you were going to make a comment about Dale Earnhardt, but then you swapped over to the Master System. So good save.
Oh no, that's Jeff Gordon.
19's Jeff. I thought 24 was Jeff Gordon.
Oh no, the bobblehead's Jeff Gordon. The 19 is Martin Truex Jr.
See, this is how much I know about racing. I thought
there
it
is
was
also
Dale
a
Earnhardt.
lot of
That's
information on his screen. Like there's a 78, a 19, a Jeff Gordon. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's
So
understandable.
Dale Earnhardt's 3. Sorry, he was 3.
Yep.
My bad.
No worries. But yeah, so for today's episode, we're actually going to be doing another installment in our, I guess, ongoing series that we're trying to do now, because this is the gaming and collecting podcast. We should probably talk about collecting at some point. And we've been doing a series now
It's just
called,
implied.
I mean, it has been for 3 seasons now, but we've started a series called Collecting Stories and Experiences, where we bring on different collectors from within the podcasting community. We just kind of chat about collecting for 1 to 2 hours. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so my best way to start, I guess, is the first question, Chris. How did you get into collecting?
Slowly and just kind of progressively. It more just snuck up on me. So I've been thinking about this a little bit coming into this episode, about when I really started collecting. And I could give you 2 different answers, because if I really go back to when I was a kid, 16, 17 years old, maybe a little bit before that, what really kicked it off was getting into Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which I think came out in 97. I didn't play it until 98. So I was about 13. And then like around 14, 15, yeah, I started like, oh, I really need to get into the Castlevania series. So I tried to get all the Castlevania games, and I think I eventually did. But of course, at that point, that means that I was trying to get games for the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and because that's where all of them were. And of course, on the GBA, the PS2 games would come as new games, and I think I left for the Navy before Curse of Darkness came out, so I never got to that. But in many ways, that was what I was doing. It was trying to complete like the Castlevania collection, and then it was I got to get all these like RPGs, because RPGs are somewhat rare. But I was getting them as they were new. Like I wasn't going back and getting new Nintendo games or Super Nintendo games or anything like that, mostly because I had emulation. Because emulation was just coming out, and it was very efficient back then for Super Nintendo and Nintendo games, Sega Genesis games. If you wanted to play them, there was no need to go out and buy them, which was my mentality back then. I wish that mentality held. My wallet would greatly appreciate me, but that's kind of the mentality that I had. So flash forward many years, I just don't collect at all. I'm just your typical almost dude bro kind of video game player, but playing RPGs, because I would play like a lot of mainstream games. I played a lot of the Maddens. I played Mass Effect. That was like the hardcore RPG I was into, Dragon Age Origins. Just playing the more current stuff, as opposed to anything retro. Just played things as they came out, got the good deals on them, talked about games contemporaneously. And that's the gamer I was for a very long time. And then in 2012, we paid off our car. It was a Ford, I think it was a Ford Escort, Ford Escape. I don't know. It's a hatchback. I don't know. You probably know. You're a car guy. But Ford Focus. That's what it was. Ford Focus hatchback.
Ford Focus.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, so this was costing us $300 a month. I have a little bit more disposable income. And I discovered this wonderful world of YouTube, which I had been watching anyway, just for more modern games. I think I was big into like Angry Joe and just other YouTube channels at that time. But then I started finding other channels like The Completionist, which is probably not the best channel name to throw out there right now. But other ones like
R.I.P.
Yeah. He donated his soul. I wish he donated other things. But there's Pro Jared that I picked up, and probably
oh no,
another one.
Yeah. With him, we got to see how the sausage was made, and also Classic Game Room, which was I got really big into, and of course, Classic Game Room was a new show every day. They had CGR Undertow, so that itch to play older games was really getting to me. That nostalgia bug was hitting me. Another one's like Pat the NES Punk, who also went through controversy. They all have gone through controversies at this point.
I mean, Mark, thank God Mark was normal. Mark was normal.
So far.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say normal. He's just clean.
He didn't come off as he didn't come out as like a foot guy or some weird shit later
or a
down the
pedo. No.
Okay, yeah, see, like the foot thing is fine. Like, yeah, the pedo thing, that's a little too far, but thank God he wasn't one of those. Actually, pedo, foot, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, Bill. That's a good turn of phrase. Horrible, but entertaining nonetheless. But classic game room, like I remember him getting into the older games, and I remember having a Wii and wanting to get on the virtual console, but I just never did. I wasn't a big proponent of getting digital on consoles for whatever reason. I kind of did with the Xbox, and I hadn't fully bought into Steam yet. I was still very much a physical guy, not out of the sake of principle, but I just liked owning things. But I got this little bit of extra income, and I was like, you know what? I don't know what spurned this. Maybe it was classic game room, but he wasn't doing a ton of Saturn stuff, but he was doing it. I was just like, I really miss having a Sega Saturn. I really miss having this system. I want to play Shining Force 3 again. I want to play some X-Men versus Street Fighter again. Like I was like, these are experiences that I just can't get on modern consoles, and there's no way I can play them right now. And of course, back then, Saturn emulation was prohibitively difficult. I think another reason why I went to the Saturn first is, on the PS3, you can play PS1 and PS2 games, of course, depending on the PS3 you have. I had a PS2 anyway. The GameCube wasn't ancient at the time. I didn't care much for the N64 because, to me at the time, and still pretty much today, it was an N64 box with the side of, it was a Mario 64 box with the side of Zelda for the most part. Some people will argue against that, but that's pretty much all it is.
Well, she won't argue. So.
I know she won't argue.
No. I'm all for the N64 slander. Keep on slandering.
I
tell
can
it how it is.
But yeah, it's just like, and all the other stuff, like the Genesis stuff, the Super Nintendo stuff, like as I already said, that was easily emulated. So I was like, you know what, let's get a Saturn. And so I went on eBay. And this was in 2012, 2013-ish. And I was like, okay, let's see what I can find. And I found a Saturn, which came with a couple controllers. I think 3 controllers. One was a third party. There's a Model 1 controller, a Model 2 controller. I ended up getting a Model 1 Saturn. A 3D control pad. Came with the Pro Action Replay, Mortal Kombat 2 loose, and Nights into Dreams loose. And I got that for, I think, $60 or $70.
Oh man, what a time that was.
What a time to be alive. And that's because like no one wanted Mortal Kombat 2. I think people still don't, but it's way more than like nothing. And people kind of wanted Knights, but to get all those accessories and get all the hookups and stuff like that was about standard at that time.
Yeah.
That was about it.
Like I always think back to like I got into collecting 09 also because of Classic Game Room, Mark's videos. And for me, it was the Sega Dreamcast. And I still remember getting the Dreamcast brand new, sealed in the box for $20 because no one cared about the thing at the time.
No. And this is kind of a little bit of a diversion here, but you brought up Dreamcast. I'm sure we'll get into later. But I remember when I did eventually get my Dreamcast, I got 2 Dreamcasts and 30 games for about $80. It was part of the package. They like, hey, take 2 of them, and like, oh,
take
okay,
them from us, please. We don't want them.
That was at that point when I got the Saturn. I still didn't consider myself a collector. I didn't consider myself a collector for a very long time. I just saw myself as someone of just hoarding video games, more or less. Like, oh, this game's good, I want it. This game's good, I want it. This game's good, I want it. And so it took me until not that long. It's probably about a year and a year after that I could probably technically call myself a collector. Maybe a little bit longer, but it was with the Sega Master System because I was looking to get a Genesis, and like the Genesis wasn't expensive, but it was moderately priced, and you still compare to the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo was insane even back then, comparatively. Now it's way worse than it was back in 2013. But at the time, when you're on a budget and you don't, you can't afford a ton of video games, Super Nintendo wasn't exactly the retro system you probably wanted to go into, especially for an RPG fan. So I was like, you know what? A system I really want that I don't remember playing a lot of, but I remember seeing it at my great aunt's house up in Wisconsin a long time ago, but I've never played it. I've never experienced it, and I've never heard anyone talk about it. I want to see if I can get a Master System. And so once again, I went on eBay because no retro stores. First of all, like retro stores, video game stores didn't really exist.
No, not at all.
No, it wasn't a thing.
No, like mom and pop shops weren't really open. The ones that did carry older games like Rhino Games were bought out by GameStop like almost a decade before 2013. At that point, a little bit less, but around that point. So people selling old games were really hit or miss, and they were very, very dispersed. Like they were hard to get to. I remember in Chicago when I wanted to get Saturn games, I had to drive like 30 miles west to a town called Volo at their like antique mall to go find this video game store. They just weren't common. They were hard to find. So I went to went to eBay, found a Master System with the is it Light Phaser is the name of that? The gun.
Yeah, the Sega Light Phaser thing.
The Light Phaser, yep. The 3D glasses, about 5 games, all the connections. It was the 3D model Sega Master System. You turn on, you get Missile Defense 3D. That's the packing game. Just a bunch of games. And again, that was like $60. And when I would go on eBay and I would start looking for these games, like Master System games, complete in box, would be anywhere, especially if you went to Goodwill, because that's when Goodwill would sell $4 games, free shipping. You could get Master System games complete in box with the brochure that came with it, their little game catalog, for $4. Like the most was $16. So I was like, you know what? I've been seeing things like this with like Pat the NES punk, and he has a complete Nintendo collection. Maybe I can find a way to get a complete Master System collection. And I think at that point, that's when I officially became a collector, whether I wanted to admit it or not, whether I considered myself one or not. That was the instance that, I could pinpoint like, I'm a Master System collector now because the Sega Saturn is too expensive. Even then, especially once again, if you're on a budget, I can emulate every other console, and this feels weird and unique and fun, and I'm discovering new things. So I think, I know it's a really long-winded story, but that brings me to how I officially became a collector with the Sega Master System, and it goes from there.
Nice. Yeah, that reminds me of like my when I got my Genesis for the first time. That was like my first experience with eBay. God, that was 2010. I want to say it was a year after I got the Dreamcast, because I started in 2009, 2010, sophomore in high school at the time. And I just remember that was my first experience with an eBay bid, and actually like bidding on something and like stalking the eBay, the listing for like days on end, just waiting for someone else to bid higher. Then I'd have to run in and bid again, because it was like a perfect deal. It was a Genesis with all the classic Sonic games, except for Knuckles. I had to find that one separately. A whole bunch of games, like a bunch of sports games, a Krusty's Super Fun House, Golden Axe, just a bunch of games, like 4 controllers, all the hookups and everything. And it was like the bid started at $1.
Yeah.
And by the end, I think I paid like $29. So not a bad deal at all.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
I just remember like I'd be like stalking that thing. Like I'd go to sleep at night, I'd wake up and I'd be like, holy shit, someone put a bid in. It got a bid higher. Because it was like a 3-day bid going on. And I was like, shit, all right, I gotta watch this.
Yeah, there was a time I went into a Goodwill, because I used to go to Goodwills a lot to find video games. Not anymore. Like, good luck with that. They wisened up to that. But I went in there once and they wanted like $25, $30 for a Sega Genesis. I think it was a Model 2. And I laughed at them. That's how low the prices were. And this was like 2015, 2016. I was like, there's no way I'm paying $30 for a Sega Genesis. Like, you get out of here. Like, that is a horrible price. Today, I mean, I think I'd bite at the chance to get a Genesis for $30 if I was looking for one.
Yeah.
It's funny because like back then, like I ended up getting a second Genesis basically for free because it was attached to my Sega CD. It was like I bought the Sega CD. It came in. There was just a Genesis Model 1 stuck to it. I was like, oh, cool,
You're
I
like,
guess.
I have this parasite now. No.
Well, I gave it to Alex for like a year, and she used it once, and then it just sat there, and then
No, I used it a couple times, but also I think it was like, wasn't it like you gave it to me like right before I went to college, and like I didn't bring it with me because I couldn't have a TV.
it was something like that. You
I
basically
think it was.
you basically at one point it was collecting dust, and you were like, I don't want it. So I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah, but I think that was when I was in college, and I was like, I'm not home. Take it back.
Yeah, and
'Cause
then
I was
I sold
not
it to a
there.
retro store for like $30.
Yeah.
It was one of the shittier ones with like the updated audio chip that didn't sound as good as the original setup. They changed the Genesis hardware like later on. It was one of the weird ones that was like it was a Model 1 still, but it didn't have the same chipset or something in it.
That is weird. That had to have been like a very late Model 1, because they had the original one that said like high definition graphics at the top, and high definition meant something different. And then they had the models that didn't have that anymore. And I guess you're saying they had another model after that, before the Model 2. That's weird.
Yeah, it was like, because I remember like I opened it up to clean it out. I'm like, wow, this looks entirely different than mine, because I had opened mine up because at one point I was considering modding mine with a region switch and the S video stuff, but then I realized that's way above my abilities because
You're like, I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah, I was kind of I gave up on that real fast. I was like, I don't really care that much. But yeah, it was funny. But anyways, so moving on to my next question. These will be progressively kind of all over the place.
Just like I am.
Just
It's
like
fine.
the podcast. Oh, wow. Perfect guess.
So shout out to James from Games with John and James. He was our guinea pig for the first one of these we did, and we kind of formed all the questions around him initially. So what's one of the craziest stories you've ever had collecting?
Oh, that one's pretty easy. That was early on in my collecting days. This was back, I think 2014. So like about a year after I started collecting, I got a Sega Genesis. That's what I got after the Master System, I think. I can't remember if I got a Dreamcast or a Sega Genesis after that. Very heavy into Sega collecting, if you couldn't tell, because back then in the early days of collecting, this isn't even early. This is like, because the collecting boom really started in 2012, 2013, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it started with the release of the Wii and the Virtual Console. I think that's what really kicked it off for a lot of people, but it became mainstream around the time I was getting into it. So this was like when the big YouTube channels started getting it. Anyway, 2014, I'm going to a store. It was called Guerrilla Games here in Jacksonville. This is one of the few places you could go to that specialized in older video games. And video game shops back then kind of knew what they were doing, but for the most part they didn't, because there wasn't a real established standard. There wasn't an established like collecting culture. We weren't as big as snobs back then, so that you could say it was better in a lot of ways. People just wanted a game. They wanted to make sure it worked, which is probably why I have so many games in poor condition, unfortunately, that don't work anymore because of the way I stored them and they got damaged and such. But I went to the store, and there was this guy turning in about, I have to say, about 20, 30 Genesis games. And they were all RPGs. Like, these were games that like I like had a massive stiffy for, right? So there was like Phantasy Star 4, Shining Force 2, Shining Force, a bunch of Might and Magic games, just like you name it. You like it was there if you were an RPG fan. And I was like, man, this guy's going to trade in all these games and probably get like 25% of the value. I don't want to like hurt this store, but I do want these games, and I don't want to pay as much as they're going to charge for me, but I want to give him a better price than what they're probably going to give him. So I walked up to him and was like, hey, are you willing to sell any of these games? And he's like, yeah. And of course, behind the counter, like in a regular situation, if you're a good store, you're going to tell people to stop that. They didn't. So I continued. I didn't know this, by the way. I'd had no like store etiquette, retro, like trade store etiquette whatsoever. So this isn't me just being I'm not trying to be a douchebag.
They'll probably kick you out of the store for that.
You just really wanted the games.
Yeah. but they should, right? Because that there's a business deal going on. There's a business transaction, and you're effectively sniping it. Like, this is how they make their money. I didn't think about it that way. I'm just like, I want the games. I don't
Give me.
shit. But so I'm looking at him like, how much, if I wanted to buy some games from you, how much do you want from them? And he's like, well, what games do you want? So I picked out a couple games. Some of them I recognized I never played before, but I didn't get like any of the big ticket games, at least in my mind, because I was like, you know what, like this store needs these games, so I'll let them have like the Shining Force 2s and the Fantasy Star games and like the things that are very familiar because I know that's going to sell. I'm just going to get some games that I've never heard of before, and if I've never heard of them before and they're Sega games, that must mean that no one cares about these games and no one's looking for them. So I was like, okay. So it's like, how much are you willing to sell these for? And eventually we came to an agreement of $50. So the games I picked out were Shadowrun, which was not complete in box, but it had the box. And it had like this cute little printed out manual that they printed out for people, because you do need a manual to play that game.
Yes.
The other one was Beyond Oasis, which still had, like, it was open, but it still had the shrink wrap on it.
Nice.
So you can open it up at like the shrink wrap because cardboard box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lost Vikings. I got the official Sega wireless controller, and of course, like no standard, no knowledge of collecting back then. It came with both controllers, and I'm like, you know what? You can have the other wireless controller in case someone wants it. But the thing is that thing only sold with 2 controllers, so it made no sense to just take one. I think Light Crusader was another one, complete in box that I got from there. There was another one I got, but the one item that I picked out of that bunch because I saw the name on it and I was a Persona fan was it was an Atlas game.
Oh yeah, I know.
And it was Crusader of Seni. And so I'm just like, I don't know what this game is. It just has a sword on it. It says Atlas. This is probably a pretty interesting game. No idea what this game even is. And so I bring all these games home and I start doing the price charting on them and see if I made any money, because price charting was just starting out at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not just starting out, but it wasn't as big as people know that it is now. And I start comparing prices and I'm like, oh wow, like Beyond Oasis, it's worth like $30. All right, made my money back. Like Light Crusader, $5. Okay, whatever. It's still going to be interesting. Lost Vikings, okay, 15. Shadowrun, 20. Okay, made my money back. Cool. What's this Crusader of Seni game? $250.
Oh dang!
So now it's like a $1,500 game, and it's gone up just a little bit, but like I still look back at it. Now they made me like do the official transaction outside the store because you cannot make an independent transaction within the store, and I was like, that's when I figured out like, yeah, this is kind of douchey, but still did it anyway because I wanted the games. But like that's kind of the craziest story I ever had is when I unknowingly bought a $1,500 game, now at least, for effectively $7. And I don't think I'm ever going to top that in my entire collecting life, because those kind of opportunities only present themselves so often, which is never. And the fact I got one of those stories at least under my belt is I'm always happy to tell it because I still can't believe it. I always have to predicate it with, yeah, don't do this, but and just go from there. It's like
it was a different time. It was a different time. It was the beginning of
yeah, ironically, question 3 might be the same answer. Not sure yet, but what would you say is your biggest collecting score?
That.
Yep. Yeah. That's what I figured. I was sitting here thinking about it. And I'm like, oh, question shit.
And you still have it? Yes. Do you still have
yeah.
It? Yes.
I came really close to selling it once, because going back to the first question, the first part about collecting, I was really getting into Master System collecting, and I really, really wanted that complete set, or I wanted some unique experiences, because again, this is a system I didn't have when I was a kid, and everything was new. Even if it was bad, it was new. It was fresh. It was a new experience. So there's another video game shop that just started out. They just hit their 10th anniversary just about a week or two ago. And there was it's called Video Game Rescue here in Jacksonville as well.
Nice.
And there was a shopper there. He was they were a pretty constant shopper at Video Game Rescue, and they heard I had a Crusader of Senti, and they really wanted Crusader of Senti. And I was like, well, what are you willing to give for that? And anyone knows when you get a big ticket item in your collection, it's really hard for some collectors to have it pried out, especially if that's like your biggest ticket item. Yeah. I think anyone can attest to that. And that was my biggest ticket item. I didn't have Panzer Dragoon Saga right now. Panzer Dragoon Saga is my number 2. And there's a difference now of like about $500 between Crusader of Senti and Panzer Dragoon Saga in terms of value. And then even after Panzer Dragoon Saga, it's like another $450 in terms of value between that and my JVC XI. So like when I talk about like Crusader of Senti is like the crown jewel of my collection, it's the crown jewel of my collection, like by a country mile, and even was then. By this point, it was worth about $400 and $500 if you had the manual. But it was special to me. It's like, okay, I'll trade this for $500 because there were complete in box copies going for $500. They just weren't like all the way available. Or I can trade in games, and he gave me a pretty fair estimate of some Master System games that were comparable. Like it had Ninja Gaiden, it had some other rare Master System games, and I almost pulled the trigger. And boy, am I happy I didn't, because those Master System games today are not worth the same in terms of equivalence of value. Yeah. And really, if we're being honest, like Master System games are pretty rough, even compared to Nintendo games. As much as I do love them, I'd much rather play Crusader of Senti, and just having that as an item piece in your collection is just like kind of a feather in your cap. Especially when like I used to go to like retro gaming parties at these shops, and I'd bring it along because I believe these games should be played, and they should be played on original hardware. And that's what I would do. But like that still has some clout, like, or made me feel like I had clout.
Yeah.
Did you like watch the thing like a hawk while you were
You're
there?
like, no one touch it.
Yeah, yes and no. Because I would watch it because I wanted people to play it. Like, because here's a super rare game that I just happened to stumble upon. And I would love to see other people who may not ever have the opportunity to play this on original hardware to play it, because that's one of the reasons I collect. Is this is something that is super interesting to me. It's part of video game history. It's an experience that we may not get to have because of the barriers that might be there when it comes to cost, when it comes to availability, when it comes to accessibility. So when I hear people love games, I'm going to bring the super rare game, and I want to see people are playing it. No one played it because, again, like I don't think many people knew about Crusader of Senti. I still don't think they do, but I love seeing those opportunities happen, because I really think that's key to the video game experience, is to play the games that they were play the games in the way that they were meant to be intended to be played, which is on original hardware with an original controller on like a CRT. It doesn't have to be a CRT. I don't want to be gatekeepy, but like if you have the opportunity to do that and you love video games, I think that's the way that you should do it if you have that opportunity.
So for context for Alex, because I know you've probably never heard of this game before.
No.
It is essentially Legend of Zelda on Genesis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. With animals.
Yes. And fun fact that I just discovered recently.
I thought you were just going to say, and fun.
Well, it is. I mean,
it's fun.
It's not the greatest Zelda clone, but it's still a really fun game.
It is.
But fun fact, I just discovered this recently. They put it on the Sega app for the Switch.
Yep.
Oh.
So it's also on the Sega Mini too.
Yeah, it's nice. It's at least you can play it, even if it's not exactly the original method. But I enjoyed that. Like they put like a few gems over on the Sega Genesis app on Switch. So
if you have the means to do it.
I gotta ask, when you went went to these like parties at the store, was it at the store that you did the trade? It was.
No. I know that place closed down.
Oh, okay.
Within like a year after that, which was kind of
understandable if they were letting people buy the game.
I do miss that store. I
Aw.
realize now I think I was getting hit on by one of the
Oh.
associates, which
Oh.
I'm married, so nothing was gonna come of
Hmm.
that. But like she was like looking at a Super Nintendo. And
Mhm.
like one of the things I did even when I was a kid, because I imported Saturn games when I was a kid. So one of the next things I wanted to do was import Super Nintendo games because
Mhm.
I imported Nintendo games because I went to Japan and got like a copy of Final Fantasy 3. It's like, can I play Final Fantasy 5 on my Super Nintendo? Oh, I can. I just got to take some pliers and remove the tabs in
Yep.
that motherfucker. And now I have a region-free Super Nintendo. And so I remember going to the counter and I was like, I'm also incredibly dense. So I didn't pick up on this, but like she was talking about the Super Nintendo to a customer, and I was like, so you could just, you can make that region free, right? And she's like, yeah, no, I didn't. How do you do it? And I'm like going into like describing how to remove the tabs and what we'll do. She's like, oh, that's cool. Is it possible like I could get your phone number and call you whenever we might need help? Trying to figure out, give customers advice. And I'm just like, yeah, sure, whatever. Cause I'm just thinking I want to help out gamers.
You're just like,
I'm helping out
"Yay!"
gamers. Like I look back at it nowadays and like she was probably hitting on me.
Yeah,
Which is
that's like a very roundabout way of going at it. But hey,
You're like, whoops.
and I'm just like completely like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll help out everybody.
I always like
oh.
Did
I
she
always
ever
refer-
call you?
No, I don't actually
Oh.
think I ended up giving her my number.
Oh.
I can't remember what happened. Like I never got a phone call, but I think like, I don't want to say how it is because I don't know how it is, but I'm sure like people will get like phone numbers of other people and they're like, should I call them? He's married and he didn't seem to be picking up on anything. Probably not. I
Yeah.
have to assume that's what happened.
Mm.
If she was hitting on me, I'm just going to assume that she was because, I'm so studly, but
it's funny. I was trying to think of like, because I don't think I answered this on the previous collecting stores we did. I'm trying to think what my biggest score was, and I think the two that come to mind were like when I went to Boston Comic Con.
Yep.
2015, I want to say. I remember I found both Lunar
Oh
Eternal
yeah, I
Blue
remember this. Yep.
and Lunar Silver Star Sega CD. Not exactly mint copies because the cases were cracked on the front, like most Sega CD games, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But they were pretty much mint in all other cases. Like they had the styrofoam block, the discs were pristine. And I believe Lunar 2 cost 130 because I remember I saw that like legit the first booth I checked out, it was just sitting there. And I looked over, I'm like, 130. I'm like, yeah, I got to do it.
Mhm.
And then I think like a different booth on the other side, they had like 3 copies of Silver Star just like chilling there for 100. So I ended up paying like 150 total, I think. No, 250 total for both Lunar 1 and 2 on CD. That was probably a bigger score. I think my biggest score though was finding Knuckles Chaotix at a yard sale for $5 box.
I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
that.
Oh, there was a time no one cared about that game. That game just shot up in price out of like nowhere.
The
'Cause it's not
funniest
even
part of
considered to be that good.
no, it's a very repetitive. I mean, it's decent. It's kind of cool for like an hour, and then you realize just how repetitive it is.
Yeah.
But I remember because I was just chill. That was back when I actually went yard sailing because it was actually a good way to find games for cheap.
Yeah.
And I remember I found this one seller. They had it was a pile of VHS tapes, and I remember walking by and I just saw the 32X logo on the side of the box, like bright yellow, and I was like, "Wait a minute." So I backed up and I just like saw Knuckles Chaotix and I pulled it out. The box was a little ripped on the side, like they had taped it back together, but it was pretty much mint. And I just like looked at it. I didn't even have a 32X at this point. I
I
saw.
was gonna ask. I was pretty certain you didn't have one at
No,
this.
I didn't have one at the time, but I was like, "That's a box 32X game." I'm like, I gotta ask, and I looked. It was like an older lady. It must have been like her sons or something that was just like piled up with a bunch of crap. And I just asked him like, "How much for this?" And she looked at it. She's like, "Yeah, $5." I'm like, "Thank you."
Mhm.
And then I had to buy a 32X after that.
Now this wasn't my biggest score, but that does remind me of a decent score of mine that I got when I wouldn't call it collecting. I just wanted to play Game Boy Advance games on my TV again, because I was one of those poor souls that got the Game Boy player for the GameCube and lost their disc.
Yep.
So I couldn't find a disc anywhere. And then like I just tried to get rid of the Game Boy player itself. And this was back when no one wanted them. They're like, every GameCube comes with these. Like, get this out of our face. We don't want them. And of course, you couldn't play them without the disc. And if that was the common thing, it's like everyone lost their disc. So no one wanted the player. So I had to go online and I had to find them. And even then, the discs were about $40-$50. I think they're up. I think they went up really high and they came back down because there's now so many workarounds that you don't necessarily need them. But for a while, they got like really pricey. And so I went to the website. I think it's was it Half Price Books? I think it was Half Price. It was it was an eBay company that specialized in selling college books, but they also had a video game section, and they would be like discounted from like the actual eBay stores, just a completely different marketplace, like a completely different economy. And I went there and found a Game Boy player, and it was for $15. And it came, I just want the disc. And they're like, no, like take the entire thing. Here's the Game Boy player. Here's the disc, $15. I'm like, yeah, bought, sold, perfect. Free shipping. Get that to me. I can't wait to play my games on my TV again. And it came. And so like the box came like in really good condition with the disc. Got a new Game Boy player that I just still have sitting in a corner somewhere. But on top of that, it wasn't complete in box, but on top of that, like I got a message, I think in the mail from this, I think this was an older woman that sent me this package. And she said, I decided to throw a game in there because my daughter really enjoyed it. So here's Zelda 4 Swords Adventures on top of it.
Damn.
So I hope you enjoy this as much as she did. Have a good time. So for $15, I got a complete Game Boy player set with the box for the disc and Zelda 4 Swords Adventure. And like, I was just like, this is great. And that was right before GameCube went crazy, like right before it went crazy. But it was already crazy for the Game Boy player. But aside from that, like, I still remember going into a GameStop in 2012 and getting Paper Mario for $14. So that, it exploded not long after that.
I mean, my favorite is still I paid $5 for my GameCube and $50 for Melee. The same purchase. So
wow.
Oh, when I was in San Antonio in 2013, I went to a flea market and I ended up getting Rogue Leader there. Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader for $5. But prior to that, the person selling it was like begging me to take their GameCube with it for $15. Begging me. This was in 2013. They're like, you can have the GameCube and the game and a controller for $15. I'm like, I already have a GameCube. I don't need that. I was stupid. But
no.
But I was like, I just want the game. I don't need anything else. Just give me the game. All right, $5. Like, okay.
Now people can't find GameCubes to save their lives.
Man.
Yeah.
I just wish I had
Lunchbox.
just cleaned up GameCubes back then. Because I don't have the one with the AV out that allows composite. No component that allows component. And now they're coming out with component cables for that, but you need to have that AV out. And I'm just kicking myself because, like, man, if I knew anything about anything back then, I could have cleaned house. And I think we all believe that. But
oh yeah,
the joy of collecting is the hindsight.
I mean, I
I
still think my craziest collecting adventure I ever went on was, I told this in the previous episode, but when the Vita got discontinued, I went on a entire day road trip across Massachusetts to every GameStop I could find and cleaned out their Vita sections because they were all clearance, like fire sale and those things. And that's how I got like all my obscure shitty Vita RPGs.
I guess this leads to me to have a question for you. I know that you're asking me stuff or either of you.
Tables.
No. But I look at a lot of this collecting that happened, you know, when it started getting big in between 2008 or 10, whenever you want to say that boom started, and pretty much up to about 2000. I want to say right before COVID. 2020 is when it got really stupid, but I think it was already pretty stupid at about 2018. It had gotten really dumb.
That's right around when it started getting insane.
Yeah. Do you think that insanity around the retro collecting market is what drove almost every single niche video game creator, not even niche, like mainstream too, to just get super working designs with their release, with their video game releases, how everything needs to have a collector's edition, how everything needs to have like a special super edition that like, oh, it's limited? Because I mean, we look back and like, we're all like, man, I wish I'd bought this game at this time because of value. And that's when that really started to take hold. That's when you started to see like even limited run games started becoming bigger around that time frame. Do you think that has anything to do with it?
I'd say so. Like, I mean, because I'm guilty of it. Like, I did not need those. I have like 3. I have both the Persona 5 Take Your Heart edition and the Shadow Thieves edition. I've opened those boxes once to get the game out, looked at the stuff, was like, and just put it on the shelf, and it just lives there now. So, and I've been guilty of that. Like, I have the Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon Switch special edition. Never opened it because there's literally a code in there that doesn't work anymore, which is wonderful. And it's literally just because collectors were crazy sometimes, and we see things and we're like, I need it, and then you buy it, and then you're like, do I actually need this? And then you just put it on the shelf.
We're crazy. You say we're crazy, as in like the past tense.
Yeah.
Still are actively crazy.
If Tango Gameworks or whatever Victor Ireland's company is now comes out with a Lunar 1 and 2 thing that's like out there, if day one I'm buying that.
Yeah,
especially the Lunar 2 one, because like we need more Lunar 2 in our lives. But
oh, absolutely. But
no, I'd say so. I'd agree with you. Yeah, I think all these like special editions are very much part of the boom in collecting.
It's not only that, but I think that's why we're seeing a lot more niche titles get physical releases. Because I can't tell you, I have no idea how many games there are for the Switch and PS4. No idea, no clue. I know you go to like limited run and they're like on their 500th, 600th, maybe 700th PS4 release. Like that's just one publisher with physical branding.
If plumbers don't wear ties, goddamn,
I was going to bring that up.
Hi, Ray. Yeah, anything is possible at this point.
We are talking publishers that have published more games for a system, whether it be the Switch, whether it be the Xbox, whether it be PS4 at this point, and I assume it's going to be the same with the PS5 and whatever Nintendo decides to release next, assuming they just don't completely get away from physical. But we're talking about more physical copies of games produced by a single publisher than there are entire games released for the Super Nintendo or Nintendo Entertainment System. Like that's gross. As much as I love physical copies, not much as I like video game presentation, but this is why you see like sub-markets within the collecting market. How many people do you know are like, oh, it's an NIS game and it's worth less and it's costing less than $20. I have to buy it. Or hey, here's this.
I'm guilty of that.
I am too. I got this game. It was part of one of GameStop's fire sales before they just melt down. Like over the past couple of months. It's called like The Legend of Zangetsu or something like that. And it's by some company I've never heard of. And it's like a first person dungeon crawler. And it's like, if I don't want to play that now, but maybe in 10 years, it's going to be worth $150 and I'm going to think it looks fun. So I might as well get it. Just because that's now what the retro gaming collecting market has done to my mind. It's like, if I don't get this game now that no one wants and no one is buying, then it's going to be one of those. Yeah, it's going to be one of those games on a top 10 YouTube channel that games you've never heard of. They're worth more than $500.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to be that guy again.
Yeah.
But you're that guy. No.
I'm a different kind of guy. I'm a worse kind of guy.
No.
This is why I own Criminal Girls 1 and 2 and Drive Girls for the Vita.
I want those games unironically.
Oh, Drive Girls is my favorite, like, what the fuck Vita game, because it's literally a beat 'em up where the girls are Transformers and turn into cars. It's great.
I don't even care if it's bad. It sounds fantastic. It could be the worst game ever. I'm still gonna love it.
I legit went to a retro store and they had it for sale for like $15. I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, it's like anime waifus and they turn into cars. And I'm just like, yep, I'm buying this.
Say no more. Say no more. It got like a 30 on Metacritic. What's that? What's Metacritic? Is that a Transformer porn site? No, then I don't care.
Nice. So next question. This one kind of goes off of the greatest gaming score. What would you say is your greatest game collecting fail?
Probably there's a no, I'll say this is my greatest gaming fail. It's not about purchasing games. So I was gone for 2 years. I left home in 2016. There's essentially 2 deployments, independent tours. And I used to store, I still store my loose games in them, but those big CD boxes.
Yes.
Because I didn't really have a bookcase or anything like that. So I wanted my games accessible. So I put all my games in these big CD books. And like I said, I like it when people play games. So I have kids and I want my kids to be able to play games. All good. One of the CD books, the zipper on it broke. And that normally doesn't sound like a big deal. However, that was one of the books where most of the CDs were. And that zipper started going to town on the covers of the CDs.
Oh, yeah.
And also happened in a couple of my other CD books. The tops of them got scratched and damaged.
Mhm.
So what ended up happening is because I stored games that way, when I went back to play them, Final Fantasy IX, Parasite Eve, Skies of Arcadia, games that I had no problem playing in the past, they had problems loading certain scenes because the top was scratched. Now, that doesn't, what I found out, by the way, is that does not matter for PS2 games. Like the PS2 games, they're all about the bottom. If your top cover is scratched to shit for PS2 games, they will still load up, they will still boot, they will still play. But it's specific for CD games, and to include GD ROMs for Dreamcast. When you scratch, that's why all of them have art on the top of it. Because that's where the data, I won't say necessarily is stored, but that's like how the laser reads it. It reflects it off that art into like the disc itself and reports back to the data, where I think on a DVD, all that data is on the bottom. So like you look at a game, do you have Suikoden 4?
Yes.
So, on Suikoden 4, like it has that big silver thing in the middle that you can look through. That there's no art on that. So you can hold it up to a light and you can see through it. But for if that happens to like a music CD or a video game CD and you can see through it, that means there's a hole there where data should be, that there is no data anymore. And that is unrecoverable. There's no way to restore that data. Once that data is scratched, it's gone. So because I had stored so many games that way, I don't know how many of my games are completely fucked that were part of my collection.
Dang.
I mean, they still are. But like, this is like, it's at the point that most of my PlayStation 1 collection, I'm just afraid to play because I don't want to find out that it doesn't work.
Oh,
It's extremely terrifying. It's like,
I can imagine.
I think like Lunar 1 and 2 are games like have slight damage that's not bad. So it's like, I think it could get away with it, but like, I don't want to find out. I don't want to find out my copy of Lunar 2 Eternal Blue Complete is worthless. Because that would be heartbreaking to know I have just all it is just something to look pretty on a shelf. And that's my biggest gaming fail, is I did not take care of games because I didn't consider myself a collector. I just considered myself someone who was getting games and wanted to play games. And it got to a point where, and I think this happens with every collector, you start buying games that you don't necessarily intend to play, or you start buying so many games you just don't have enough time to play them all.
That's Phil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just more sentimental than it is about playing the games, because there was a time that I would play almost every single game I would buy, and then it just got to be too much, especially when I started getting more into the RPGs. So yeah, that's my biggest fail. So if you're getting into collecting and if you're not sure you're a collector, just ask yourself this: do I have enough time to play all my games? If the answer is no, and you're still buying games, you are a collector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then start treating your games right at that point, because
Yes.
you don't know when you want to go. You don't know when you're going to want to get to them. And when you do, you want to make sure you're able to play them.
Yep.
No, 100%. No, I was thinking like fails because that honestly is a way more in depth than I thought. I thought the question would go, because for me, like my biggest fail was like the time I got duped on a copy of Power Stone on Dreamcast.
Ooh,
where I paid. This is before when I learned like eBay, you have to check everything like in depth.
Yep.
Because it was one of those like eBay listings where there was no actual picture of the game. It was just a picture of the cover art. And my brain at the time was like, oh, this is trustworthy. I can surely trust them.
I haven't been burned on eBay yet. It's fine.
Yeah. And I didn't really know that Dreamcast games were easily burnable at the time. So when I ordered, it was like $50 for Power Stone 1. I was like, oh, that's a good deal. It comes in, and I pull the disc out of the case before I even look at it. I'm like, this feels really light and really flimsy, like right off the bat. Like it's a burned CD disc. And then I pull it out, and like the cover art says Power Stone Collection. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Something here's not right. And then I immediately open it up. There's no manual. It's just a printed out piece of paper. And the disc is clearly not a GD-ROM. It's clearly a burned CD. And it was a burned copy that they shoved Power Stone 1 and 2 on to. And they sold for $50. And I was like, this is not what I thought. And I'm like, it works kind of. So I guess I'm not really that upset. But I'm also kind of mad because I wanted actual copies of Power Stone.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about eBay is where they will get you. Now, if they didn't put this in their description, you could have gone to town, because eBay is almost universally with the buyer.
Yes.
This is why a lot of people do not sell on eBay, is because it can be a seller's nightmare, especially when you're selling games that have value, because all the seller has to say is, this game doesn't work. I was lied to. It doesn't look good. I want a refund. And eBay will be like, well, give the man a refund. Better give them that refund. And they could be lying their ass off, but they're not going to know. They deal with millions of people every day. What are they going to do? But the thing is that the way that a lot of these scammers can get away with it is they just put in the description, like, please read, or they don't even have to put please read. Especially back then, they didn't have to. They said, they would just have to say, this is a burned disc with Power Stone 1 and 2 for you to buy. And they just have to put it like in a corner in the small text, and they don't have to say it's the actual game. So when you go to be like, hey, they lied to me, and they're like, no, I didn't. It's right there. Burned disc, not actual copy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if that was the case with you, because I was going to ask you, why the hell did you not like set them on fire?
Because I was high school, below 18.
Yeah.
Didn't know any better. Also, it was one of those
inner Karen yet.
They also
inner Karen.
When I went back to message them,
stop being a Karen though. Sorry.
No.
Well, the inner I need to speak to your manager talk.
Well, no, I think actually what happened was I went back to the seller, and they did one of those like magician acts where they were just mysteriously gone, and I was like, yeah. So that was probably
you weren't
my
the only
fail.
one. You probably were one of many.
I've since acquired both Power Stone 1 and 2, like real versions, so I'm not as mad, but I don't even know if I have that bootleg anymore. I should go see if I still have it somewhere.
Hey, maybe you could sell it to the bootleg man. He'll be at Kineticon next year.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we went to a convention. There was a guy selling nothing but bootlegs, and it was hilarious. I still have that.
You should call the cops and just make sure you're not selling that for a profit, right? You can't sell that for a profit.
Yeah, I still think my favorite was when it was at Retro World, and me, Alex, and Josh from Still Odin were just walking through, and all of a sudden, like, Josh just pauses and goes, "Hell is that?" And he looks over, he picks up a cartridge, it just says "Eyeless Mario," and I'm just like, "What the hell is this?"
What is that, like Nintendo's Fatal Frame?
It was like some like Boo themed Mario World like ROM hack, but it was just like the cover art was ridiculous.
Yeah, wasn't it like his eyes were bleeding or something? Like
his eyes
were.
It was more funny than it was like annoying to see. I was like, they're just doing whatever.
Eyeless Mario.
I'd play it.
So now, next question. This one I find interesting. Have you ever had a game that like you were just kind of out and about and you found this at like say a retro store you just happened to pop into that you honestly did not have the money for, but you could not pass it up?
Do I have to have bought it?
Yeah, that's kind of like the thought.
Because there's a couple I'd be like, I didn't have the money for it, and then I was told I was going to be murdered if I bought it, and I really wanted to buy it. You know, I mean, I don't know if I technically have the money most of the time.
True.
Yes.
I guess maybe like to rephrase it, like, did you ever see something that like it was like such like a you'll never see this kind of again kind of thing that you just had to get it there, like no questions asked kind of thing?
Well, since this is going to be on YouTube, give me 1 second. I'm going to say yes. They had a layaway system, so I was mostly responsible about this, but the answer is technically yes. So let me go grab that game.
No problem.
Bill will insert some background music as we wait, or not. Wait, you said you could do that. You did it the other day.
I know this is entertaining podcasting for the audio only listener.
I told him to insert some background music. The clown music was not playing though. I was very
so.
No.
Xenosaga 3 is an expensive game.
Yes.
I have not played Xenosaga 1 or 2. I played a little bit of 1 and I was quite bored. And it just got to a point, I should play it again because I need to. But I saw Xenosaga 3 at the store, and like at one time the store even had the version with the lenticular cover that I could have picked up, which that's super rare. But it's got to the point I'm going to blame Rick from Pixel Project Radio because
I mean,
why
understandable.
not? Yeah. But like Rick got like a copy for like $170, and I saw it. I was like, you bastard! Like, I wish
How dare you?
How dare you find a good deal on a game I want and can't have? So then I finally saw it for sale over at once again, I don't know how my local game store gets like copies of Xenosaga 3 on a regular basis, but
they know a guy.
They had a copy. They have multiple people apparently, especially like where that's at. Like, it's so weird, but like it's called Gone Broke Gaming. You know, throwing out all the shout outs to my local peeps. Also, no, that's an Orange Park, but technically Jacksonville. But I saw it there and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take the dive. I'm probably never going to play it because I don't have the time, but I super am interested in having it. I have no nostalgia for it. I technically shouldn't be buying this. I could probably put my money into something far more responsible. But I'm going to get it. I think the number 2 thing but I had nostalgia for it, so I don't necessarily want to say that like it's like I because this kind of sounds like regret. I still do kind of regret this purchase, but like I had to get a physical copy of the game, and that was the Scott Pilgrim KO edition, which was like $160 from Limited Run. So as soon as that was announced, I jumped on that. I'm like, yoink, I am getting the like super premium ultra special edition of that game, which ironically was still cheaper than Xenosaga 3. So I don't feel too bad about that one. Because like it doesn't break the bank as badly. But yeah, Xenosaga 3 is probably the closest thing I have to an example like that.
Okay. Yeah, so the game that spawned this question for me is I've mentioned it before, like because Alex remembers, because this was ironically it's like a game store literally that me and Alex can drive to on a daily basis now because it's like right like a few minutes away. But at the time, this was when Alex first moved to Connecticut, and I was visiting her at the time.
Yeah, and I said, "Oh, I found a game store when I went to Target. Let's go."
Yeah. So this is pre-COVID, like pre-podcasting. I was still just a gaming blogger at the time.
Yeah, 2019.
2019.
What a time.
Went into this random game store, and I'll never forget. I was looking around. They had a bunch of stuff, but nothing too crazy. And then I looked under the glass case by the register where all the the rare games always are.
Right.
And for $120, Popful Mail, mint. And I saw it, and I looked at it, and I looked at Alex, and I went, I don't have the money for this, but I need it.
And I said, buy it. Why not?
Because we had
Life's
planned
about
on
taking
going
risks.
we had planned on going to a bunch of retro game stores that weekend, and I was like, I'm gonna blow my entire funds in the first store we go to. So I ended up shifting some money around in my bank account to make it work, but like this thing was like mint like condition.
Gotta
like,
get it.
Opened up, styrofoam block, manual, like nice shiny lenticular manual, disc pristine, like perfectly clean. And I was just like 120. I'm like, I didn't even look on like Price Chart to see what it was even going for. I just like I needed it, so bought it there. And nowadays that game is like $700. So
you made a deal.
Yeah, I think I made it
that high.
Or I might be thinking of Burning Rangers. It's definitely
Burning Rangers.
Let's visit good old price charting real quick.
I think it's like 380, 400.
430.
Yeah.
Still.
Oh wow. Burning Rangers is like down to 600 now, but that's besides the
point. It's time to score that deal.
Yeah.
Regardless, I still 120 compared to 400. I think I did pretty good for a.
I think so.
For a game at the time I thought
Just
was really good, and then I was on a certain show called Retro Hangover. You might have heard of it, and
I've heard of it.
Huh?
I discovered.
What's that show?
I discovered that game's a bit more frustrating than I remembered. But yeah.
Bit.
But yeah, so that was probably that was the inspiration for that question in particular. Just like the kind of like all logic goes out the window and I need it now. And you just buy it now, worry about it later kind of thing.
And I'm not the voice of reason. I'm always the voice of chaos to Bill. I'm like, buy it. You know you want to, just do it.
I couldn't pick that up.
Yeah.
No, I'm the calming presence of the show. I try and get Bill to do ASMR and he just won't do it. Come on, Bill.
Are you gonna lick the microphone, Bill?
No.
That's
I don't know what
job.
This microphone has been to like 3 different houses now. I don't know where it's been. Like I'm not. But anyways, so now kind of turning that question on its head, what would you say is the one game that you let get away?
It wasn't a game. And I have 2 answers for this, and they're both PlayStation answers. Puffle Mail is close too, by the way, because I had the opportunity to buy that at like 180. But someone else picked it up, and it was right before COVID. I was like, so that's up there. But one that I let get away, I think it was 2015 or 2016. And this is the one that really chaps my ass. It was a PS1 with the first party LCD screen combo, and it was $50.
Oh, nice.
And I did not have the money for it at the time, or I couldn't justify purchasing it. It was one of those. Both of these end up with me calling my wife saying, "You bring that home, I'll kill you." So I did not get it at the time. I really wanted it because that's the console I had. That was a console that did have when I was a kid, and I loved playing PlayStation 1 games that way. The screen was beautiful, like really popped out the color, and the resolution was small enough that everything looked phenomenal on it. And so like for $50, I was like, that's not a bad deal. PlayStation 1s were starting to go up in price, but you could still get a PS1 for about $15-20 in and of themselves. It was the LCD screen that was always the big money gainer, but like they've really shot up in price recently. So like I look at it and like it really kicks me in the ass, like really, really hard. The other one, I ended up getting a PS TV later. I have a little PS1 now. I got it for super cheap. I don't have an LCD screen, unfortunately. And it's the PS1's in shit condition. The other one's a mint. But I had the opportunity to get a PS TV, the Lego bundle, like the Lego movie bundle. It all came in the box, except so that would have been a controller, a PS TV, and the Lego movie game digitally on it. but the person who had gotten the PlayStation TV had to have swapped out the memory card because the memory card was the largest one that the PS Vita had. So I think it was either 128, was it gigabytes? I don't know the memory size.
The Vita's memories were very limited.
They were either 128 or 256, or maybe it was even 64 gigabytes. I can't remember, but it was the biggest commercial one or the second biggest commercial one that the Vita had offered. And that was $40. So like the price of the memory card itself was like $150. And that was one I was like, I can get a PS TV and a controller and this memory card for $40. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, let me call my wife, because this isn't exactly in the budget right now, because this is like back $10-15 games. That's what I was doing. And I still love doing that, by the way. But I called her up and like, hey, I got a really good deal here on this thing. Like, is this something I can buy? And once again, it was like, you bring another one of those stupid video game things home and I'm murdering you. And that's the one, mostly because of the cost of the memory card. Now there's plenty of options for like SD to Vita memory card adapters that you can do, and they're fairly easy and accessible. But that was not the case back then. And it's always better to have OEM and first party equipment over, doing third party solutions when you have the option. And so just thinking to myself, like the memory card itself would, like, you essentially had to pay the price for a new console just to get. I was like, oh man, I really wish I had the option to go back and pick that up.
Nah, I get that a lot. Like for me, like the biggest one that I passed on that I still kick myself over was 2017. I had an opportunity to get it was a copy of Magic Knight Ray Earth for 300, I want to say. And at the time, I'm kicking myself still because it was basically between that or Burning Rangers. He basically told me, he's like, I'll do 300 for one or the other. Like, you pick. And I kind of like juggled it, and I went with Burning Rangers instead. And I don't regret it because they're both absurdly expensive now. But Magic Knight Ray Earth has become like that game that haunts me in my Saturn collection, like to this day. Because like one of my biggest collecting goals I want to complete that I'm probably never going to just because it's absurdly expensive is I wanted to finish off the Saturn Final 5, which was Panzer Dragoon Saga, Shining Force 3, Burning Rangers, Magic Knight Ray Earth, and House of the Dead, I believe.
I think so.
I have 3 of those. I'm missing House of the Dead and Magic Knight Ray Earth, and it's just one of those things where I see it. Like when we were at Retro World this year, I saw a copy of it for 700, and I just went, no, like it's just not worth it. The other one I let get away was a mint boxed copy of Earthbound, like everything there, manual, case, everything, $300.
That's the score. That's like the game.
At the time, I was like, I just couldn't do it at the time. I was still living at home. I wasn't making a lot of money at the job I was working, and I was just like, I just can't do it. And the owner of the store, Bowser's Basement, shout out to John. He told me he would have like held on to it for me, but I told him like flat, I'm like, if you get someone who's going to buy this thing, sell it. Like, don't like try holding on to it for me, who's probably never going to get the money. And like a month later, someone came and bought it, and I was just like, yeah. And now it's a boxed copy of that game is probably double that at this point.
I don't like to view a lot of those games as games that have got away, because normally if you can't afford them, you can't afford them. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. If we could afford them, then we'd have them.
Yeah.
And like if that's the fair market value at the time, that's the fair market value.
Yeah.
So I struggle to say those games got away, and that's kind of why I shied away from Potful Mail. It's just that immediately after Potful Mail left that store, because they just forgot to keep up with the pricing. That was in like the early days of COVID. Like, so that price was already way low. but I was still able, for example, like I was still able to secure a copy of Shining Force CD. So just because I wasn't able to get that one game, it still translated into another game that I was happy with, because we're collectors and we're always buying garbage. So like, that's just, I don't, that's why I don't like to view some of these things as games that have gotten away. I'm not trying to take that away from you, but like if a game is at fair market value and I can't afford it, I mean, that's just, I just can't afford it. If a game is way below fair market value and I can't afford it, that's when I'm like, I hate myself. Like, because like I'm never going to see an opportunity like this probably ever again. And I am just in a position where I cannot justify the purchase. That's where it's a dagger. But if a game's $300 and I'm seeing it for $300 and I can't afford it, oh well. I mean, it's just, I'll emulate it and cry.
I think in the corner.
Thinking about it now, I think for like future versions of when we do these in the future, I might change that question to like maybe like what's your biggest gaming like white whale, like the game that you're always like looking for. That I think that might make a bit more sense. Because I mean, for me, that's still Magic Knight Rare. It's gonna forever be the one that's haunting me.
You're like, no.
So moving on now, this next question, this is purely this is probably the joke question in here, but it's the one that I always go back to because it happened to me once, and I'm always curious if it happened to somebody else. Have you ever been bamboozled on a cartridge game?
Yes, just once, to my knowledge, and not as a collector, just trying to get a game, and that was Final Fantasy VI Advance. Much like your story of Power Stone, I ended up buying the game on eBay, and it was a Chinese reproduction. If you're picking up what I'm laying down, it worked fine. So like, I didn't care until I realized later down the line when I actually wanted to play it, it didn't save. But I already gave the seller a great review, and I was like, oh well, this sucks. Like, that's why it was about $10 cheaper. Makes sense. But yeah, that's the long and short of that one.
That's not as bad as mine, because mine is forever. It's in the shot right now. There's a nice copy of Ken Saden in that Master System back there.
Oh,
it's not actually a copy of Ken Saden. It's some baseball game. They swapped the board inside.
Ken Saden's not that expensive of a game, though.
No.
Why would you do that?
All I know is when I bought, I spent $15 on it, and I popped it in my Master System, and baseball pops up, and I just went, okay.
Maybe there's more backstory to this. Maybe it was a manufacturing error, and they accidentally put. You never know. Maybe you have it could have been, because I mean, if it's not that expensive of a game, like why would someone do that? Maybe it really was like manufacturing error. They put the wrong sticker on it, or
It's not like Tonka was known for their great video game, production acumen, so it's possible.
True. That's just the one I always think of, because I bought that at a flea market, and I always remember plugging it in, thinking like, oh, Ken Saden, this is considered one of the better Master System games, and then baseball, and I'm just like, great.
That's just like Master System games can be taken apart with the Phillips head, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna find out.
We're about to know.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yep.
Yeah. It makes me wonder. It's probably great baseball, because there's not a ton of baseball games for the Master System. It's I think there's a Reggie Wayne baseball as well for the Master System. But
it actually might have been that one, because I remember I think
Reggie
his
Wayne
picture
baseball
pops up. I think his picture pops up, and I was like, this ain't Ken Saden.
Which I think might be more valuable than Ken Saden. But I'd have to look that up.
So maybe you won.
No, he still didn't win.
As I can say, I left this price tag, and I paid $12 for this. So,
oh my god! But the only thing I could think of is maybe for whatever reason. When did you buy it?
2016.
Okay, so that was right around the time. Like, Yeah, it started to get stupid. We all say like it officially got stupid in 2018. It was well on its way to getting stupid in 2016. And that's when a lot of people wanted to check carts to see that the carts were valid, because that's when you were starting to see copies of Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, all the big Super Nintendo games. People want to open them up, and Nintendo games, open them up and make sure that it was like the original cartridge and not some like repro trash. So what probably I could imagine happened is that you have a retro game store that was in possession of it at one time. They don't know what Master System games are. They don't know much about retro games, but they go online to these communities and they're like, oh, they open up the carts to make sure everything's good and they clean them and everything like that. So we got to do that too. So they like probably got a bunch of Master System games out one time, and they opened all of them and they're like, let's clean them all. And then just took them and then started putting them back together. And they're like, okay. Then they just
Honestly,
put it out.
That might be the answer right there.
Maybe there's just a bunch of random games that are just all messed up. Maybe.
See, to me, like nothing will ever beat the GameStop Chrono Trigger debacle with that Chrono Trigger that was a Madden that went to like 12 houses before they finally took it off the market.
Yeah, like
but
that. All you got to do is turn it on, GameStop.
That was
why would we do that?
They did turn it on. It started up, and they were like, "That's good."
Good. Like the context? No, don't care.
What's this EA Sports? Yeah, they made Chrono Trigger, sure.
Yeah.
Square EA. I mean, it was company.
True. Technically. Yeah, I just always laugh because like I'm always like, this goddamn Ken Saden that's haunted me forever. I got a real one later on, but like I still have this goofy one.
You know what you should do is you should find someone, and if anyone's listening, here's what you can do for Bill. Get a new PCB board, have someone make a ROM hack of Reggie Wayne as the protagonist for Kinsaden, and then flash that ROM onto a PCB board and put it into your copy of Kinsaden.
Yes.
That would be something. So, next question. This one is a little out there, but like, what would you say is like one of your like strangest collecting habits? Like, I've noticed a lot of collectors, sometimes they just have weird things they do with their collections.
What do you mean?
Like, Bill, you say yours.
For me, it's like I have like this really weird like hatred for alphabetical order in my games on like the shelf. Like, it drives me insane, like for whatever reason, and I have to like arrange things in a certain way. Like, I always have my RPGs right up front because I just like to show those. Or another one is like my obsession with like collecting 3DO games. just like bizarre, like odd habits that you have.
Or just random garbage games that you found. That too.
I don't know. I mean, there's probably something I'm doing that's weird. When I look over here, it's because it's my collection's right over here, like to my right, the bulk of it.
Oh, I thought you were looking for an escape route.
Yeah,
how to get out of here.
That too. I still collect amiibos. I think that's weird. I do think that's actually pretty weird. Because why? There's really no purpose to it. You can see over my left shoulder here, a bunch of amiibos over there. There's a bunch of amiibos up there. And there's even more there. There's like no more room for amiibos, but I'm still getting amiibos. And they don't really do anything. But I guess a lot of people do. This kind of like Funko Pops. So I mean, if you like it, you like it.
Figurines. I mean, like me and Bill both collect figures, so yeah.
I guess my next. I guess the next thing that would be a little weird is I am always buying a new controller to see if I like it more than the previous controller. So like Retro Fighters, for some reason I'm just very 8-bit do-averse. Not because I think 8-bit do makes bad controllers, not because I have any problem with 8-bit do. It's just that I want to find the 8-bit do alternative. I can find something better in 8-bit do, which I don't think I can. But like I've spent a lot of time getting Retro Fighter controllers, and they're fine. Like they're really good controllers. But it's like I could have gotten that with an 8-bit do controller. So why didn't I get the 8-bit do? I don't know. So I keep on buying these controllers, looking for better controllers for exactly what I want. And like now I have like just a pile of controllers that like I have all these like USB dongles just sitting in front of me for different situations and different controllers and different controller types. And I have like 3 different Saturn controllers that I can use on my Saturn, even though I only use one. So I think that's a little bit weird. It's just my obsession with like, oh, there's a new controller, gotta get it, but I don't need them like at all.
Mm-mm.
I have plenty of controllers. In fact, I do wish, while I say this, while I'm on the topic of controllers, can someone please release a decent aftermarket PS3 controller? Because my PS3 controllers have horrible drift or just have weird fucking problems that need to be addressed. And this one from Retro Fighters, which is called the Defender, it's pretty good for the most part. But like the D-pad, that's not the D-pad. The D-pad, it kind of sucks.
Mhm.
It's not horrible. It's not the worst, but it's not good.
It's not
And
good.
just when you rest your fingers on like the triggers, like just slightly, it registers like this registers as a button press. I barely move my finger. It's just resting on it. So I cannot play my PS3 games like just threw it, it fell down. I cannot play my PS3 controllers like that. My PS3 games. I can play my controllers like that. Can't play my games like that. So please, someone, a solution, because playing Dark Souls, I had to use this shitty Power A controller with an even worse D-pad, but has a better form factor. Because for some reason, my DualShock 3 just wanted to have my character run around in circles after playing for 30 seconds. So I had to use this monstrosity, which looks like an Xbox controller and feels like it was made. I mean, it works, but like, God, it feels not right.
Not
but
correct.
It's like the best solution. So please,
I
somebody.
I know I'm in the minority, but I hate that analog stick configuration.
Oh, what, the Xbox one?
Yeah, it's like basically the non-Sony one where they have to both be below.
You just grew up on Sony and you can't escape.
For me, I can't adapt to the D-pad being low. The D-pad has to be up top.
It's Quitter's talk.
I don't know. It's hard. Well, I mean, the Wii U, greatest console ever.
Yes, they're both up top.
Yeah, they reversed it. They're both up top. Still, the Wii U Pro controller is still my favorite funny one, just because they're still up top on that, and it's basically reversed
80 hours of battery life.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure mine still has a charge at this point.
Yeah, it's not good for 2D games though. It's
No.
really bad.
Well,
if only there was an episode about controllers out there.
Yeah, and Alex sends Cheetos every 5 seconds.
Patrick Star, that's all I gotta say. It's a good controller. You should get it.
So the next one, this might sound kind of similar, but I'm gonna kind of explain my reasoning.
Okay.
What would you say are some of your favorite oddball collections within your collection? I'll give a couple examples. For me, I have an obsession with collecting NASCAR games, and I have almost every NASCAR game, or say my collection of I am trying to collect every version of Clax there is. Just kind of weird oddball collections that probably no one else goes for, but you do just because they bring you joy.
Saga games. That's one.
Okay.
Squaresoft came out with Saga. It's not just Saga games. I'll get to some of those in a minute too. This is probably my runner up when I really think about it, because something else just popped. But so I have the 3 Romancing Saga games for the Super Famicom, even though I can't speak or read Japanese.
Yet.
Probably never will. I have the 3 Game Boy games, which are the Final Fantasy Legend 1 through 3, which are all Saga games. I have Romancing Saga for the PS2, Unlimited Saga for the PS2. I got the Play Asia releases of the Romancing Saga remasters for the Switch. I got Saga Frontier 2 that I just got recently for the PS1. I also got the remasters for Saga Frontier on the Switch as well. I got the Scarlet Grace for the Switch, Play Asia physical release. So I don't know why I love collecting Saga games. I think I have some variation of every single Saga game in one way or another. I'm pretty sure. Why? I couldn't tell you. It's like Saga Frontier is one of those games that like it felt like my special little game, because when that game came out, like it came out after Final Fantasy VII. And so it was in that era where everyone saw an RPG, and if it didn't have tremendous production value, it was trash. If anyone remembers that era. I don't think you were born yet, but it's I'm not trying to make 1997.
Oh, yeah, well, I was.
Yeah, we both were.
So Alex was 1, I was 2.
Okay. I'm not trying to like make fun of you. I'm just saying like it.
No, I got it.
It's
I
okay.
got you.
It's okay. I make fun of him all the time. Go for it.
But in 1998 is when Saga Frontier came out. And I remember really liking it, picking it up, because now, hey, wow, we're getting all sorts of RPGs. And then other people played it, like no 3D graphics, and it plays weird, and where's all the movies? This sucks. And that was the mentality for like the new wave of RPG fans for a long time. That if it didn't have that, it sucked. It was like not at the good level. And I actually, to be honest, I had that thought about a lot of like anime looking RPG games. So if it didn't have a lot of anime movies, which is Lunar's fault, that I didn't really care about it. I just put it down, which is why I think I put down Tales of Destiny originally, because I was like, where are all the movies? I want more anime movies. And it didn't have a lot of them, honestly. So I stopped playing it. But that's why I like Saga. And the other thing, the weird thing about Saga Frontier is that when Saga Frontier 2 came out, I think in 99 or 2000, it may have been 2001, whenever it came out after Saga Frontier. Now, I remember when Saga Frontier came out, EGM, which was my favorite game magazine back then, gave the game their silver award, which means it had to have an average of 8s. Or right below 8. I think it got all 8s or an 8 or all 8s and a 7 or something like that. It got their silver award, Editor's Choice Silver Award, saying, hey, this is a good game. And I agreed. And then Saga Frontier 2 is about to come out. And they said, well, Saga Frontier 2 is about to come out, and hopefully it fixes all the mistakes the first game made. Yeah, wow, like that game was rough. We don't understand anyone who liked it. It's like, you did.
Yep.
You did. You said you did. Why are you saying now, like, oh, we all wanted it to be a better game than the last one? You thought it was a good game. Anyway, that's where my love for Saga comes from. That's probably why I have a bunch of Saga games. The other one, which is probably more insidious right now and is a big problem I'm going to have to address at some point, and I don't want to, is Kemco games.
Oh, yep.
From Limited Run. Every single time Kemco comes out with one of their little releases, I have to get it. So I think I have like about 25 Kemco PS4 games, which is just essentially a bunch of RPG Maker games that they released to the masses. They used to be on the Vita. I think they started out on the Vita.
We're on 3DS as well.
I didn't know they were on 3DS. I knew they were on the Vita. But yeah, now I have a ton of them, and myself and member of our community, and it sounds like a member of your community as well, Ray. We pick these games up as soon as we have the opportunity to, and this is probably a very bad thing, and my money is going to a sinkhole, but Kemco forever.
My
favorite
favorite
JRPG powerhouse.
My favorite Kemco game I ever played was Alphidia on the 3DS. I played the entire game with auto battle on, just all way through, and I beat it.
You can do that. I mean, they are mobile games. There's gotcha elements like they had to change for the console. So that like, oh, if you pay this much into it, and like, well, they can't because they're not online. Like, oh, right. So like they have different methods of like, you can see like how, like, if you just pay this much money for these tickets, then you can get more, but they have different methods of getting these tickets, and they're supposed to break the game. It's adorable. It's adorable. And I love it.
Nice. Before we move on to the last question, I was thinking of oddball collections. This is one that I've always thought about doing, but just never have, because it would be a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it'd be really funny to have like a full set of like, for like maybe like PlayStation or something, just all greatest hits copies.
That would be. Sometimes you get the better version of the game.
True. I know particularly Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex on PS2. The greatest hits edition has much shorter load times.
Silent Hill comes with all the additional. Silent Hill 2 comes with the additional content. If you get the greatest hits PS2 version, which I don't think a lot of people know.
I just always thought it'd be funny to have like a PS1 specific like set of nothing but the green labels.
So ugly.
Yeah, but I kind of love it.
So ugly, it's great.
So, one of the last questions I got, what advice would you give to people trying to get into collecting?
Don't. No, I'm just kidding.
That's
No.
my usual. That's my usual.
Alex is right. Don't.
Don't
Yeah.
do it.
That's my
Don't.
usual answer. But let's just say if they have to, like they're gonna get into it regardless. Like, what advice would you give?
Budget,
Fine.
budget. Like, know your limitations.
Have a voice of reason.
No, because you're always going to override the voice of reason. It's always going to be overridden.
Well, no, I mean,
Um,
like, have it be a separate person that says no.
Well, here's the thing. Like, the only time you're ever going to listen to that person is if they're a significant other. And they're they're going to tell you don't do that or I'm going to kill you because like we need that money to survive and eat. So like
Yep.
that's the only time you're ever going to listen to them. But if it's a friend, or someone else, if they tell you no, you're going to probably want to buy it just to spite them. Or if they tell you yes, you're going to want to buy it because you're being encouraged to do so. So like if you are going to be told no, make sure like not everyone's going to have that voice that's going to be able to reach out to them in that sense. So like it's nice to have, but not everyone's going to be able to give it.
Yeah.
So what I would say is this: if you want to if you want to collect, first of all, know what your budget is. Set aside whatever money you can per month. Be like, this is the only amount of money I'm going to spend this month on collecting games. And by the way, I don't follow these rules, so I'm being a big hypocrite here. I'm telling you from experience what you should do. That will be very difficult. That'll be very difficult for you to do. But these are things that you should do. So get the budget out there. 2, know exactly what you're looking for. One of the biggest pitfalls I see in this, like, again, a lot of this is from personal experience. So not everyone experiences this, but I do, is you'll be collecting for systems or you'll be collecting in a certain genre. And you'll hear people say, hey, this game is a lot like this game that you're trying to find. And you'll be like, oh, really? I really like game X. I should buy game Y. And then you'll find another lot. Then that will start you down a new rabbit hole. So what you really should do is just stay to the list that you're trying to collect for and don't deviate, because there's always going to be another rabbit hole you can go down. There's tens of thousands of games at this point, especially because of how much gaming boomed in terms of like physical copies during the PS3, PS4, Switch, all of that era. Like all of those systems have just massive amount of games. You're not going to be able to get them all. And there are going to be a lot of them that are extremely cheap and or affordable or within your budget. And the thing is too, is like once you start getting those games, now you're going to want to expand your budget because now you're going to want the games that you want in addition to the games that you may not know you want. So just stick to the games that you know you want. Make a plan. And if you deviate from that plan, then stop that idea. Just stop it cold, like abandon it. I used to have the idea I was going to get every single Master System game and every single Wii U game. I abandoned those because I realized I strayed off that path a long time ago and I didn't dedicate myself to it. I could have a complete Wii U collection right now if I wanted to. I have like I think the heaviest hitter on the system technically, which is Devil's Third. So if but when I realized I didn't want to spend over $100 on Turbo Stunt Squad, I was like, I need to stop this because I'm going to put that $100. I could spend $100 on Turbo Stunt Squad, or I can spend $100 and get 4 games of decent quality in my collection. And that's that. So if that goes through your mind, maybe deviate the way that you're collecting, but be disciplined, know what your budget is, know what you want to collect for. If you're susceptible to peer pressure, don't even start.
Yeah.
Don't even start, because peer pressure is a bitch and it'll get you. And ask yourself if it isn't better to just get a mister. Ask yourself if like you're not getting the same thing out of straight up emulation, because if you don't mind, and if you're the kind of person that wants to play it on like on your current LCD screen TV, which is fine. Again, and things look really, really good nowadays on LCDs through either retro tanks or through misters or whatever. If you can do that, then there really is no harm in just getting a Raspberry Pi or a mister or emulating, because if you really do want the authentic experience, you got to get yourself a CRT TV. Those are hard to get. Those are really hard to get, and they're costing more and more and more every year because no one's making them. And here's another unfortunate fact: less and less people are repairing them. Try to find someone to repair them, and they are going to start breaking down. I had to get my repaired. I had to call like 5 or 6 different TV repair shops before I got someone who knew how to work on a CRT TV, and he looked like he was close to retiring. So, like, ask yourself what kind of experience that you want. And if everything lines up, you have the budget, you have the money, you have the idea, and you can stay disciplined and go after it. But the only reason I say all this is because you don't want to get yourself in a position where you regret any of it. Because the minute you start regretting any of your collecting, and I have a bunch of regrets. I look at my collection a lot, quite a bit. I'm like, did I really need to buy like 10 Xbox One games? Probably not. They're not even games anyone cares about. They're just super cheap. Why do I have them? And you might get yourself into a position where you're just buying games just to have games, because inevitably a bunch of collectors do that.
Yep.
And so many of them will be so cheap, you can't offload them if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So be very careful. Know what you want. I've repeated myself. That would be my advice.
Or just don't.
Or just don't.
That's my usual answer, but sometimes people won't take no for an answer. So,
right, a lot of people won't. But I do think that the retro collecting scene has cooled down quite a bit.
Yeah,
I think that's. Go ahead.
I just there's not as many people that are just getting into it because it's the hip thing to do. There's the people that are, I've noticed lately, are people who actually are interested.
Yeah. I think that was always there, but I think just like all trends, there's so many ways to play these games that don't require the physical copy, that and people are becoming happier not playing it originally, especially now that you start seeing it like all these digital copies. And I understand you don't own them, but all these digital copies you're starting to see on the Switch Switch Online, whatever the hell they call it. And as long as Nintendo keeps doing that, and Sony makes a lot of these old PS1 titles available through PS Plus, even though, I mean, to be fair, I heard it just plays terribly on PS5. And all the backwards compatibility capabilities that the Xbox Series has, and you can play these games still digitally, that you don't necessarily need to go out and get them. I think a lot of that's cooled. And I think like a lot of that nostalgia for NES games has eroded. I think that nostalgia for a lot of Super Nintendo games has eroded. And the nostalgia you're seeing is like more around RPGs, because RPG fans have mental problems. And as someone who is one, because we hold these titles up so pristinely, it's not like someone who is a fan of Donkey Kong Country. Like, they don't need to go back. They don't need to have a physical copy the same way that a Chrono Trigger fan feels about Chrono Trigger. So, but that's why I think like the market overall is cooling, because a lot of those games that were big, I think they did belong to casual people, and the people who really wanted to get their fix got their fix, and they're moving on. And that's why like RPG fans just have a different mentality when it comes to these kind of things, which is why those games always maintain their value. And there's a lot of crossover with other games, which is why you see that. But I think when it comes to PS3, a lot of these people are like, oh, this is a hidden gem, it might collect value. A lot of them won't. And you're seeing this on price charting right now, coming down from the COVID high, like in like 2021, maybe 2022 is when they hit their peak. I think late 2021. I'd have to go look at the charts again. But a lot of the PS1 and PS2 games have gone down like a third in value from that peak. They're like right at slightly after COVID craziness. So they're coming down. And I think the reason for it is, I mean, the market has cooled and people are moving on, and that retro market, especially with all these remasters that are coming out like every day. There's no
Yes.
reason that you need to go back and
Yeah.
play it on original hardware. You have like all these current options, and people, there's a lot of snobs that are just like, well, it's not 60 frames per second. No one cares.
No, they really
Nobody
don't.
Yeah.
cares. Stop it. I understand you care, but like the majority of people are not going to notice the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second unless you have it side by side. Okay. Like you don't need to tell people in order to go play Tales and Symphonia, they got to go buy a GameCube and they can hook it up to their LCD TV. Oh, wait, that looks like crap too. So you're going to tell them to go get a freaking CRT on top of it? No, then let them enjoy it on their fucking 30 frame per second remaster.
Yep.
Let it
Sorry.
out.
So the final question I have for this, this one originally was a joke question. I just kind of threw at James during our previous episode, but his answer was so mind-blowing that I had to keep it for future episodes.
Mm.
What is the one game that you will never have in your collection? So to preface what you think about it, the reason why this one was so like shocking to me was his answer was flat out Final Fantasy VI. And he gave this big answer about how I know, like it shocked me too. He just like the game, like it's one of those games he just doesn't have any feelings for at all, and he just doesn't want it in his collection, period. And it was like, it blew my mind hearing it, but then it kind of also made me think, I'm like, what? Like this there has to be other games that people have similar reasoning to.
Like there's not a big reason. I hate to say I look at you and immediately a type of game comes to mind. Games I will never have in my collection. And
Tiny
it's not it's around the same reasoning that you just said. It's like I don't ever foresee myself ever having a NASCAR game in my collection.
That's fair.
And it's not because like NASCAR is evil or I have any negative feelings towards NASCAR. I used to watch NASCAR a lot in the past, but I if I want a racing game, I'm gonna play Gran Turismo.
Yeah.
Because the whole entire NASCAR like experience is like you go in a circle for 500 laps, and no, there's strategy to it. I understand all that. And it's very interesting to watch, but I can't see if like there's a manager mode or even driving the car, it being all that entertaining from a simulation standpoint. It have to be pure arcade. But if I'm going to do that, why wouldn't I just play Daytona USA?
Yeah.
That's kind of my position on it. So like, I don't think I would ever have it. Now, if someone just gave it to me, I'd be like, cool. I just kind of put it in a corner somewhere. I mean, I'm not going to like deny
in the trash can.
But I think like even to the Final Fantasy 6 comment, if someone just gave him Final Fantasy 3/6, I don't think he would just be like, he would tell them no. So like he'd probably still accept it.
Fun fact, he actually gave us that answer and he said he immediately flipped it for more money.
It's worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like a NASCAR game's not. So
See, now the funny part is like he completely threw me for a loop because my entire reasoning for that question was I wanted to make a joke, because for me, the one game I always say that will never be in my collection is the Guy game.
Because you don't want to be convicted of child porn?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Then it's a piece of shit that there's no reason to own. But I always bring that one up because that is my favorite convention. Like when I go to conventions, I have like little games I like to play going through like the game stuff. One of my favorites is like I do like a tally of how many copies of the Guy game I find just to see. And at Retro World this year, I ended up finding 3 copies, and one of them definitely sold because it was there one day and it was not there the next day.
Ew.
So, yeah, that was always my answer. I just always find it funny what other games people like just don't want to have in their collections for whatever reason.
I mean,
maybe someone's collecting it though to throw away. Maybe they're collecting it to destroy.
Oh,
Get
like
it
Superman
out.
64?
Well,
like you see in Bubsy.
Yeah.
I know they do it with 64.
I mean,
it's
should
also
just throw away all of those games, in my opinion. But anyways,
I mean, getting past the obvious like sketchy circumstances around it too. It's also an expensive game that I'm not wasting money on. Like
True.
Which
You're
game?
not a true hero.
The Guy game, like for what it is.
Oh
it's surprisingly expensive for no reason, and I'm just not paying that money for that.
If for some reason I thought you said like it was going to be not the guy game. I thought we were talking about Superman 64. Like that game's
Oh no, that game's worthless.
in every way. Flying Through the Rings isn't that bad, but it's bad. It's a bad game.
Well, once you figure out that Superman basically controls like a flying car, like you kind of can figure it out.
The guy game's fascinating though, because like it is so expensive. So I don't know. Maybe what is it? Because they were 17, 16? Like that's why it got taken off the shelves.
There was one of the girls was like a few months away from being 18, but she lied about her age, so she was technically underage during the filming.
Oh, awesome.
So it was one of those. Because there's a DVD version of the game where he made it into a DVD game that was later released that had that one girl removed from the actual from the game.
Yeah.
That I've never actually even seen that before. The only reason I find the guy game fascinating is the guy that created it, Jeff Spangenberg. His history in gaming is really fascinating because he started at Acclaim, was a huge part of like he made like Arrow the Acrobat, and then was a big part of the Turok series. Then he left Acclaim and formed Retro Studios. And yeah. And then they had their partnership with Nintendo and they were making Metroid Prime. And then Miyamoto came down to the studio to see how they were doing and realized the CEO of the studio was making softcore porn on the computers. And Nintendo basically paid him to fuck off and took the studio from him. And then he used said money to start Top Heavy Studios, which made the guy game. It is just a weird history of this guy.
He has talent at something. If they made it that far, I mean, that really is interesting.
Yeah,
it's really funny you can connect Retro Studios to the guy game in a way.
Yeah, it's a big web out there, especially when you start looking at what companies are connected to what.
Yeah,
it's always interesting. Like when you look up as long as we're on these talent tangents here, when you look up Koei and you look how Koei made their money before they started making the whole entire Romance of the Three Kingdoms games, they were a softcore porn video game company.
Yep.
They were a husband and wife team that made porn games, and they were with the Koei label. And then once they started to be financially viable, that's when they started making the more historical sim type games.
Oh yeah. So final part of this, and I'm stealing this from Slade. There's your shout out, Slade.
Boo.
This is the point where I take the Q&A and we flip it, and any questions you have, you can ask us.
I hated that when he did that, by the way.
Yeah.
Did he make you go on a scavenger hunt?
No, we're the only ones that did a scavenger hunt.
Dare.
Scavenger. He did this like I love being on his show. I don't
No, it's okay. You can hate on him. We won't do. It's not like this is gonna be posted anywhere.
But like when we were doing our top 5 stuff, and he's like, "I have a top 5 for you," and like I had to slot the games into the positions before I knew where they were. And so like, this is your number 1 game. I'm like, it was some game I did not like. I'm like, fuck you.
I think it was Zelda. It was like
yeah,
Zelda.
It was one of the Zelda games. I'm like, you motherfucker. Oh well, whatever. I guess it's my number 1 game.
See, my favorite part of that was I was listening to it at work, and I had it on my little speaker. And like anytime you got like upset about that, you would just like your audio would just spike like way louder than everyone. So everyone in my shop would just look over and like, what the fuck was that? I'd just be like, I'd be like, it's nothing.
Shh.
Also, he coined the term bill level collection in that, which is just a thing now, I guess.
Bill level collection. I mean, you do have a bill level collection, Bill.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't
not based
know
off you. It's a different Bill, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buffalo Bill. His body's in your closet.
Can't confirm.
I
don't.
I don't really know, because I think you answered a lot of the questions that I probably would have had throughout the episode. It doesn't have
to be about gaming. It could just be about life. Like, what's the meaning of it?
42?
No, 12.
Wait, what's Jimmy Johnson's? Was that 42?
48.
48? Oh, I was about to say, who's 42?
Well,
Is there 42?
there is a 42. It's not the same.
17.
It's John Hunter Nemechek now, but it's been like multiple different drivers over the years.
So I guess it's not the meaning of NASCAR life, at least.
Nope.
Okay, so my question for you is who's winning the Winston Cup this year? And I don't care if it's not called the Winston Cup.
Well, because NASCAR's point system is an utterly stupid mess, I'll flip a coin. Maybe it's probably going to be. So it's been a Penske driver the last 2 years in a row. Maybe Joey Logano wins it again or something. I don't know. I'd like Martin Truex to win. It might be a Hendrick car. NASCAR's point system is dumb, and it's like a flip of a coin who wins half the time.
That's what makes it interesting.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, I guess I prefer when it's the actual full season points winner who wins it all in the end, not the guy who sucked all year and then got lucky in the last 5 races and won. But
I can understand why they did that though, because like people, I like NASCAR's front loaded.
Yeah,
like when I watched NASCAR, I watched NASCAR for a few years in the early to mid 2000s. It's very front loaded. So like at the end of the season, even NASCAR fans were not paying attention anymore because like, oh, this guy is like 500 points ahead. We don't got to watch any of these races. And then they introduced the playoffs, and that was interesting when they broke it down to like 10 racers. But they're like, well, this racer is complaining that he was within 5 points and he should have made it. They're like, okay, that's a good idea. We'll add more racers.
Yep.
And then became whatever it is now.
I mean, now half the field makes it, and there's like a knockout style thing where like every 3 races they kick 4 of them out. It's stupid.
Yeah, that sounds really dumb. They should
like
just keep it to 10. Keep it to 10. And if like the people who are not involved in the playoffs win the race, they get their money, they get their notoriety, just like the good old days. Like, I don't know how many, like, I know they expanded the amount of races too. And like the last thing you want to hear is maybe you shrink the season down. And
I think they should, because get farther away from the start of the football season, like the better. Because like once we get close to football, nobody cares anymore, and they're going to start watching football instead.
Yep.
Well, it's always the Daytona 500 has always been like the last or second to last weekend in February, hasn't it?
It's always the week after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's always been that. So you can't do that, because that's when the South historically, I know it's not an exclusively Southern sport, but that's where it started, and that's where still most of the fan base is. But the South is big into South is just big into football, period.
Yeah.
It's like you can't even, like, baseball is like nothing down here. So like once football is over, you got to give them something to do, and no one's watching hockey or baseball really. So I can understand why, NASCAR is just a continuation of the football season. But, you start getting into August or September, no one cares anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's for sure.
So if they ended it like in July, right before, if they want to start it after the Super Bowl, fine, but you can start it before the regular season starts. You can stop it before the regular season starts. And that way, like, everything's narrowly focused. You have a big bang, and then people can immediately turn their attention to football. And it's this great synergy of sports or something like that.
Nah, totally. But yeah, we've gone almost 2 hours.
And we got some NASCAR talk in.
We did. But yeah, so we're at the end of the show. Chris, would you like to shout out all of your stuff once again?
Yeah, sure. If you I am Chris Coplien from the Retro Hangover Podcast. I do a show about retro video games with my friend Shane. And we talk about a game that is 10 years or older. We go over its characteristics. We talk about whether or not we like it. And then we talk about whether or not the game holds up today in our opinions. And usually we have a guest. Bill's been on a couple of those episodes, and I highly recommend you go check those out. As Bill mentioned earlier, he was on the Popful Mail episode, and that was a fun one. Everyone had a good time. People received it well. So go check out that episode. It's a very fun episode where we talk about how much working designs is terrible. And I think you all would enjoy that if you enjoyed this today. But if you want to know where you can find us, just head over to our link tree, which is at linktr.ee/retro hangover, where we have a variety of other stuff that you could go check out at any time. So yeah, thank you for having me on the show, Bill. Definitely appreciated it. Thank you, Alex, for being here as well. Always great to enjoy your chaos, and look forward to the next time.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks for coming on, dude. This was a fun chat. And once again, guys, thanks for joining us on the Gaming and Collecting Podcast. The Gaming and Collecting Podcast can be found on all your major podcasting platforms, particularly Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We're now on YouTube with occasional video versions of said podcast coming out.
Not always, though.
No, depends on if Alex does her makeup or not.
Honestly, yes.
And if you'd like, you can find all of our links at linktree/thebarberwhogames. And if you'd also like, you can come join us over on the GNC Podcast Network Discord server, where you can find all things gaming.
Water Bottle Podcast coming out soon.
The 3DO Experience, Geek Addicts, also, or just come to talk gaming, anime, or just all sorts of nonsense. Alex has an entire channel there dedicated to water bottle propaganda. It is wonderful.
Curses.
But once again, guys, thank you for joining us, and we will see you all later.
No.